Hi guys, my name is Uriel Diaz and this is Aqua Wai. In today's video we're gonna be talking about CO2, what it is, the importance in planted aquariums, and a little bit of history and how to use it properly in the planted aquarium. So let's get started. First of all, what is CO2? CO2 is a gas molecule. It is composed of one atom of carbon and two atoms of oxygen, composing that gas molecule. It is commonly used in the fabrication of sodas, fire extinguishers, or even to preserve food. But we're not here to talk about chips and Coke. We are here for talking about the relationship between CO2 and plants. This relationship is essential for life in our planet because plants will absorb CO2 and convert it to oxygen that most of human beings and other animals will breathe and then produce more CO2 that plants can absorb, and then the cycle goes on and repeats every single day. But how do plants use it? Plants are autotrophic beings. In other words, in order to develop and grow, they have to produce their own food. This is achieved through a well-known process called photosynthesis, in which with the help of CO2, water, light, and other nutrients, the plants will be able to develop and grow. Photosynthesis is divided in two phases. First is the light phase. In this phase, plants will absorb energy in the form of light, such as the sun or aquarium lighting. And also, they're gonna be absorbing all of the nutrients we're providing them with liquid fertilizers. So we have to keep our plants with a good soil and obviously with a good fertilizer. Plants will absorb this energy through chlorophyll, and this chlorophyll comes in two varieties. The type 1 is the most of the plants have. It is based in magnesium, and it gives the plants the green characteristic color, and the second type is based on iron. That's why we have red plants in the first place. Also, in this phase, the oxygen is released. That's why we see our plants pearling during the light period. Next, we have the dark phase. It doesn't mean that it occurs at night. It can happen without a problem with lights on. The only thing here is that it doesn't require light as a source of energy. In this phase, the plants absorb and synthesize the CO2 and the other nutrients into more basic molecules, so the plants can work easier with these basic forms to convert them into more energy or growth. In conclusion, for the light phase, the plants are gonna be absorbing all nutrients, light, CO2, water, and in the dark phase, they're gonna be synthesizing. Then, let's talk about a little bit of history. It has been well known for a very long time that photosynthetic organisms can consume CO2 and then release oxygen into the atmosphere. But planted aquariums was a really new feature, a really new area in which, with the help of pioneers such as Mr. Takashi Amano, the father of planted aquarium, that people realized why not to add CO2 to the planted aquarium. So Mr. Takashi Amano started with an experiment. In this experiment, Mr. Takashi Amano added carbonated water in the aquarium, so the CO2 will be released in all the aquarium. But this was very inefficient, because as a regular soda, the gas will release very quickly into the atmosphere and will no longer be available for the plants in the aquarium to absorb it. So then Mr. Takashi Amano began to add pressurized CO2 continuously to the planted aquarium. There are many different ways to add CO2 to the aquarium, from DIY methods to professional ones such as pressurized CO2. So all in all, it is important to add CO2. Whatever form you can add to your aquarium, it will help your plants to grow faster and healthier. And let's talk about a myth that it's very common in planted aquarium lovers. That is that the breed of fish produces enough CO2 for the aquarium plants. As long as you don't have very low light and such tiny little plants that are low tech, it's gonna be fine. But if you have more plants, if you have more light, you must need to add pressurized CO2, because the one that fish produce will be not really enough for your aquarium. And it is said, why in rivers or lakes the plants are growing in such really good conditions? They are reddish, they are bushy, lush. Why in the environments that don't have CO2 on it, the plants look fantastic? And this has a simple answer. In this industrial age, CO2 levels in the atmosphere are above the sky. So in the atmosphere there is so much CO2. So with the water movement, it will dissolve in the water of lakes and rivers, so the plants can synthesize it. That's why in some rivers and lakes, the plants are growing healthier than in your friend's low-tech planted aquarium. So how we can add it with efficiency into the aquarium continuously? There are 4 different popular types of methods used in planted aquariums to add this continuous CO2. First of all are reactors. They are kind of ugly. They will mix water with the CO2 and dissolve it almost perfectly. Then we have CO2 chambers. They were very popular, but they're not as efficient. It consists in a chamber that contains CO2 and has contact with the water in the bottom part, but it will dissolve very slowly and the plants will not really appreciate it. Then we have the internal diffusers. They are very popular and well known in the world of aquascaping and planted aquariums. They go inside the aquarium and they will dissolve the CO2 into small bubbles so it can dissolve better in the water column. And of course we have the external diffusers. They go in a canister filter and they connect directly to the hose, so the waterfall will blow all these little tiny bubbles into all the aquarium and it will dissolve it pretty well, while we don't have more visible equipment in our aquarium. So if we have an internal diffuser, how do we get the maximum of it? So there are 2 ways to place an internal diffuser. First is to place it in the opposite side of the outflow of our canister filter. If we don't have a canister filter, there's this second way. In this way, we need to position it right below the outflow of whatever filter we're using. The main point is that the water flow can blow all these little CO2 bubbles into all the aquarium to dissolve it properly. So since we know already in which way we can supply and add CO2 to our aquarium, we need to know how much of it needs. In this sense, there's also a myth of the quantity of bubbles per second that the aquarium needs. But the bubbles per second the aquarium needs really depends on the hardness and the pH of the water. We have tables and different tests that can show us how much CO2 do we need in order to achieve a proper concentration depending on the hardness and the pH of our water. The higher the hardness and the pH we have in the water, the higher CO2 we need to add to achieve a proper concentration. The easiest way to have a general idea and monitoring continuously the levels of CO2 in our aquarium is a drop checker. These devices, with the help of aquarium water and a pH react agent, will tell us in a color scale which levels of CO2 do we have in our aquarium in kind of real time. So blue color is for not enough CO2, yellow is for too much CO2, and green is for the ideal CO2 levels in our aquarium. So the plants can do their photosynthesis while fish and other shrimp and snails are still happy in the aquarium. So all in all, supplying our planted aquariums with CO2 will provide our plants a better chance of coloring and growth. They will grow quicker, healthier, and also opens the door to a more wide variety of plants that we're gonna be able to use in our aquariums, so we can have carpeting plants, red plants, and some other plants that without CO2 will not be able to survive in an aquarium. There's so much different ways and alternatives to add CO2, so there's not really an excuse for not adding CO2 for your aquarium. That's all for this video, guys. I hope you enjoyed it. If you do, hit that like button, subscribe if you haven't done so yet, and follow us on Facebook. We're uploading daily content related to nature, aquarium, and aquascaping that you must be interested in. Remember, my name is Earl Diaz, and I'll see you around.